In this video, I'm going to make up some pretty standard, pretty basic, delicious, spicy Texas style hot links. Going to make them up from scratch, smoke them, and then probably eat enough of them to put me off them for the next 6 months. And to start off, we're going to need some sausage meat. So usually in these videos, you're going to see me cubing up and grinding up some beef and some pork, but I've got some pre-weighed out, pre-ground brisket trim here from a couple of weeks ago. And all you really need to know about this is it's about 70-30 split, about 70% lean brisket trim and 30% hard brisket fat. And I put it through the grinder on the Coarse die, which I think is about 6 mil. Put it in the freezer, defrosted it, and now we're here. So we can get straight into making our sausage. And to do that, I'm just going to get an appropriately sized vessel. And this is 2 kilograms of ground brisket. I like to portion them into about 2 kilogram bags. They're easy to store if you keep them nice and flat and you know that you're working with 2 kilograms each time. And it was super important when I was grinding this up that I kept all the meat cold. Gonna stop the fat from getting weird and smeary, but ultimately prevent the fats from splitting whilst we're cooking these. We don't want oily sausages. So it's still a little bit frozen in places, which is why it's quite stiff. And as I say, we're gonna be working with 2 kilograms of this meat. So the amounts of spices and cures and salts that I'm gonna put in here is specific to 2 kilograms, but there'll be a full recipe with the amounts below in baker's percentages. So you can scale up this recipe or scale it down depending on how much meat you're working with. Anyway, we're going into this mix with 40 grams of salt, about 2%. 80 grams of milk powder. That's just going to give us some bind insurance. We want a nice tight bind on this, and that's just going to help ensure that happens. Getting into our spices, we're going to go in with 10 grams of black pepper, 8 grams of smoked paprika, 10 grams of garlic powder, 6 grams of onion powder, 3 grams of mustard powder, 15 grams of cayenne pepper. You can use less if you want. These are going to be some genuinely hot links. 10 grams of crushed red chili flakes. And then what we've got here is some mustard seeds. So these are dried mustard seeds, and I like to soak these overnight. You can soak them in water. I like to do it overnight because they take a little while to rehydrate. So these have just been soaking in water for about 12 hours. So I've just drained that off, and we got 6 grams of softened up mustard seeds going in. And then last but definitely not least, we've got 0.25% of Prague powder number 1, Instacure number 1, whatever you want to call it. Pink salt, although in the UK at least, is no longer pink because people are getting it confused with Himalayan pink salt. But basically we're going to be not necessarily cold smoking these as in a traditional cold smoke, but we will be smoking them at a pretty low temperature but above fridge temperature. So we need something to add to this raw meat in order to make sure that we don't put this meat in a situation that is perfect for bacteria to grow. So we're going to use curing salt to do that, and that's basically going to keep us safe. So 0.25% going in works out to be 5 grams for this particular batch. And that's pretty much it for everything that's going into this. For some reason my camera shut off there, but as I was saying, that's pretty much it for everything that's going into this. You'll see most recipes calling for ice cold water. I personally like to try and do it without water to start off with, because I feel like adding water creates another variable. You get slightly different texture and consistency between each batch. So I won't use water to begin with, but if this starts to feel a bit too firm, then I'll add some. I want to make sure everything's super evenly distributed, but most importantly, I want to make sure that this is nice and tacky and ensure that it's going to hold together like a sausage should. So after about 5 minutes or so, this is looking nice and well bound. And obviously you can do the whole trick. If you put it in your hands, turn it upside down. If it doesn't want to fall off, then you're good. So that's all done. We'll put this to the side. When it comes to casing these sausages up, we're going to be using natural hog casings. These have just been soaking in water overnight. And I get a lot of questions about where I get my hog casings from. And for years, I used a brand called Tong Masters. And for years, I had problems with skins blowing out, things like that. Just generally inconsistent in diameter, inconsistent in strength. So for the last couple of years, probably I've been using a company called Butcher's Sundries. They seem to have the most consistent product. You very rarely get blowouts. The diameter is nice and consistent, so all the links look the same. And this isn't sponsored. Butcher's Sundries probably have no idea who I am, so this is genuinely just what I use. So now we've got to get these sausages cased up. And to do that, we're just going to take big chunks of our sausage farce, throw it in, and try and push out as many air pockets as you can. Air pockets in the hopper is going to result in air pockets in the sausage. So I want to make sure that this is really, really compact. Once that's all done, and unless I'm doing an event, I like making these small batches of sausages. Far easier to work with, and you don't have to fill your freezer up. Get my hog casings, just gonna lube this up. I'm gonna tie it off nice and tight. Pull it back so the knot is at the end. Start turning out these links. I want it to be nice and plump, nice and full. No air pockets. Twist it forward. Pinch it off, twist it backwards, nice and firm, and keep going. We've got this little guy at the end, which is going to be perfect for temp checking these links. So that's it. These are looking nice and firm, good amount of bounce to them. So I know that I've cased them well. Good indication that you binded them well as well. And we've got 10 pretty hefty links out of this 2 kilogram batch, plus this little one at the end. So the next thing we need to do is get these into the fridge. And that is very important because there is curing salts in this. So you need to give that at least 12 hours to work, or you may be ingesting stuff that is toxic to you. So if you're doing a cured sausage like this that you plan to smoke, then definitely don't just make them and eat them. These need to go into the fridge for a minimum of 12 hours. Also, by putting them into the fridge overnight, you're going to rehydrate some of those spices, so they're not going to be gritty or anything like that. It's also going to allow the proteins in the meat to kind of bond into the shape that we've made them, so they're going to have a much nicer, firmer texture. So they have to go into the fridge for a safety perspective. They should go into the fridge for a quality perspective. Also, it gives the skins a nice chance to dry out, so when you smoke them, they should be nice and dry. Set up a bit of a pellicle, and that's going to give you a much redder, nicer color on your sausage. So 3 good reasons to put them into the fridge overnight. If you're making a fresh sausage with no curing salts, you could just fire them into the pit now. I like to put them onto a sheet with a rack, and you can definitely cut these up into individual links right now. I like to keep them together because I find there is less chance that the stress that these links are currently under is going to unravel the actual links themselves. These little twists are going to dry out, which means that when we snip them in the morning, the sausage meat is still going to be nice and retained inside the casing. I mean, if we cut them now, it's not going to spill out. I've done that a million times, but I like doing it this way. There are 10 Texas style hot links ready to go into the fridge overnight to dry out, do all that good stuff I talked about, and then we'll come back tomorrow and smoke them. So the next day, casings have dried out, sausage is set up, curing salt's done its job. Now I'm just gonna separate these links, and you should be able to see that those twists have dried out nicely. So we'll take these outside, get them onto the smoker. So often when it comes to making small batches of sausage, I'm usually going to use the Traeger, the pellet grill. We're going to be smoking these at a pretty low temperature, around 165 Fahrenheit. We want to get as much smoke flavour into these as possible before they actually get cooked. So nice low temperature, and I think that if you're going to use a pellet grill, definitely use a smoke tube. I think between the pellet grill itself and the additional smoke flavour from the smoke tube, you actually get pretty good results as far as sausage goes. So, and it means I don't have to manage any temperatures for the next couple of hours. So for those that don't know, this is a tube filled with just pellets, and I'm going to get this going a little bit more. Let that flame die out and get these sausages on, making sure that none of them are touching. Shut the pellet grill down, set the temperature to 160, come back in about 3 hours. So it's actually been about 2 hours, and this Traeger seems to be putting a nice amount of smoke onto these links, looking nice and red. Smoke tube's going. They're not ready yet, and I can tell that because they're not quite firm enough, but ultimately I'll be checking these with an instant read thermometer, make sure they're reading at 145, but for now we're going to keep these going. Couple of hours later, these are probing around 145 Fahrenheit, checking that with my chef's temp. So we're going to take these out and drop them in this ice cold water, and that is first and foremost going to stop the cooking process. That's going to help to prevent overcooking and shriveling, and it should give us a nice snappy casing. So these will cool down, they can go into the fridge. I'm not ready to eat them right now, but when I am, I'll just take them out the fridge, reheat them in the oven, on the smoker, however works best for you. We'll cut into them and taste them. So it's actually a couple of hours later. I got these out of the fridge. These are nice and cold. I just got them out for a thumbnail. And these ones I actually reheated on my Weber. I reheated them on the Weber because I had some chicken on there, and they are looking really good. Nice and glossy, still nice and plump, no shriveling. So that tells me I cooked them to the right temperature. Reheated them up to about 145, 150 Fahrenheit, and these are ready to try. These look great. Yes, and first thing I'm gonna have to do is give it a snap. Real nice and juicy. You can see a little mustard seed in there. Plenty of juice. They're still pretty hot. And I always find a test of whether a sausage has been binded and cased correctly is if you can cut it and the casing doesn't immediately shrivel up. If you can cut it like that and it holds a nice tight firm shape, that's generally a well-made sausage. Yeah, that's looking great. Really, really happy with that. I'm just gonna go in for a big bite. That really is a great sausage. Nice and spicy, but not spicy for the sake of being spicy. There's a huge amount of flavour going on. 2% salt, pretty much perfect every time. Never really gonna go wrong. Got some heat. What I need is a little bit of sauce, some bread and some barbecue sauce, and some pickles, but I don't have any pickles. Nice snappy casing. And honestly, there are some things that I don't necessarily love cooking on the Traeger, or the pellet grill. And that's generally things where the cook is really, really important. Something like a brisket, where the cooker that you're cooking it on plays a big role in the outcome, whereas sausage is kind of the other way round, where the prep is really important. If you make a really good sausage at the beginning, the smoking of it is less important. As long as you're getting some smoke in it, it's going to be good. Provided you've got a great recipe, you made the sausage well, kept everything cold, got a good bind, all that kind of stuff. Smoke tube on a pellet grill works just fine. And yeah, and you can see that this is still nice and tight. It's not shriveled up or anything like that. That is because we took it to a good internal temperature. We didn't overcook it. We didn't break the fat. There's not loads of oil leaching out. Took it to a nice, safe 150. This is an all beef sausage. Probably came up to around 150 in the end, but the key point being this was cooked to the correct temperature, which in my opinion makes all the difference. So I think that's pretty much it. I'm not going to continue to just describe it. It's a hot, spicy smoked sausage, and it's delicious. But if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. It really, really genuinely does help me out. Please let me know if you give this recipe a try, and otherwise I'll see you next week for another video.